The technological singularity will be here this decade. Ray Kurzweil predicted the transformation of our world 20 years ago from an explosion of artificial intelligence. But it was more a theoretical argument that he made that this would happen, and he only described it in very general way that you couldn't predict it. I'm telling you now that I can and will give you details of prediction of how this is playing out, and that Elon Musk and Tesla are central to taking us to the next level of artificial intelligence. And more thing I can tell you about now, looking at the companies that are actually working on AI and exactly the business model that is being used to release it. So we're beyond just looking at some charts of Moore's law and saying this is something that will happen. We're at the level where tens of billions of dollars are being spent. There are many companies, business competitions, many technological races to develop these things. Commercial AI is already at the heart of Google and Apple and Amazon and all the other big tech companies. Many of them worth over $1 trillion. Elon is already taking AI and making billions of dollars with it, and he can take AI and robotics to the next level. And that will reinvent society even more than the car and the train did 100 and 200 years ago. So what is my definition of technological singularity? I'm saying the technological singularity is when we have human level or near human level AI for many aspects, important aspects of tasks that have a large economic value, and then there will be an explosion of human capable artificial intelligences. It doesn't have to be beyond human level intelligence, although it can be for certain narrow aspects. It doesn't have to be generally beyond. It just has to have a huge economic impact on our world is something that I think is singularity. It's not like, okay, it's another business boom. It's like the internet was in the late 1990s and early 2000s. For me, a singularity needs to be bigger than that. So, and I'll go into the more detailed aspects of exactly how big and how things will happen based on my prediction of things that will be developed by Tesla. So Ray Kurzweil wrote his book back in 2005 called Singularity is Near. He predicted this technological economic boom from greater than human level intelligence, superintelligence. He said we would reach human intelligence, and that'd be huge. And then we go far beyond relatively rapidly. I'm observing that Elon and Tesla are making the reality of much of what Ray said for human level intelligence. I'm saying it only has to be narrowly beyond in certain aspects to have economic impact. So by the end of this decade, we'll be at the reality of a world with tens of millions of humanoid robots, the Tesla bot. And the start of this technological singularity will happen. I'm saying the reality of it is it will not be a fast takeoff. Again, futurists are debating fast or slow takeoff. In their argument, fast takeoff would be in a couple of years or less. This massive whoosh. Others talking about semi-hard takeoff in 6 years, 10 years. And then slow takeoff would take 100 years. I'm talking about a takeoff area in the range of 10 to 20 years. So Elon Musk and Tesla are developing real-world AI and humanoid robots. Tesla is already the fifth largest technology company in the world at nearly $1 trillion valuation. Elon Musk and Tesla have already made over 3 million electric cars. 1 million people have paid for the full self-driving software or the autopilot driver assist software. And 100,000 people are using the beta version of what is called full self-driving, which is a super advanced driver assist where you can not intervene and let the car drive on city streets and highways. Tesla already have $12 billion of profit in 2022 and will have about $90 billion in sales. So by the end of the year, we already released something, a version of it called 10.69 of the full self-driving software. And you can see videos on YouTube where it is highly successful. People are making very complicated drives anywhere using it and not having to intervene. It's very safe in terms of Tesla's safety. There's some misinformation about there that Teslas are not safe, for the full self-driving not safe. One if there had been major accidents from the 100,000 drivers, then you would know about it. It'd be all over the news because all the companies that want to attack Tesla, all the business people would attack. So it's been used by over 100,000 people for 6 to 9 months, and there have not been major issues and problems. That many people using a driving system, you expect, one death a month, just based on law of averages. So instead, we've had that issue, and it looks like by the end of the year, we should get a version 11 that can be widely released as safe or better than human level driving. It would mean accounting-wise, they'd recognize the full revenue instead of only half of it now. And then more people will adopt or buy it, and they'll continue to improve. It'll improve more rapidly because AI now with things called neural nets, which I studied for I did some master's degree work, which I didn't complete in the 1980s, looking at neural networks. The latest versions, they get better and better. The more data, the more computing power they use, and the better the algorithms are. That's just where the winners are. And I have research papers that track this very closely. You can see the diagram of that, where solving things like chess or Go, the bigger the problem, the more compute they're using, the better recommendation engines that Amazon has is based on having more data and more AI. Tesla has something like the 5th most powerful supercomputer in the world in terms of data center with compute power. And they're developing their own system called Dojo for training stuff. So soon we'll have the most compute power, most powerful supercomputing networks to develop their AI because they'll have the most money to devote to it, and they have the engineers to make the humanoid robots. There's a company called Giant AI, smaller company. You can see the example there. Upper torso humanoid robot, which can pick up objects, be trained to pick up objects like in a factory. This is more at the demo stage, but you can see that demo-wise, it works to recognize and pick up objects. That is a capability that I think will develop far more quickly than people think. Walking robots have been around, like Asimov for 20 years. Boston Dynamics is walking robots. That won't be an issue either. So grasping things, walking, and having resources 1,000 times more than these other companies is why Tesla will succeed with it. They can mass produce it. So it'll actually change our world. If you have 100 robots that can be made to do flipping tricks like Boston Dynamics does, it means you can get 100 million views on YouTube showing off your tricky robots, but that doesn't change your life. You and I don't have a Boston Dynamics robot. Most companies don't have Boston Dynamics robot. There are only like a few hundred of them. There are also the other robots, industrial robots. They've been around for many decades. Toyota has them in their factories, the giant robot arms. But again, we don't use them. There's total of 3 million of those kind of arm robots after many decades of use. They're critical in car factories, airplane factories, any big engineering assembly, but they can't be taken out. They're not general. They're way too specific. You can't move them, etc. But a humanoid robot that walks and picks things up, that is something they can easily put into an application. Also the self-driving car, something that you can just pop it in. I can buy a self-driving car and use it for a taxi service, right? You can get these things and instantly put it in places. It's like the difference between 70s and 80s. There was an internet at that point. It was all text and letters based. Only people in computer science departments, like I was in the early 80s and stuff like that, were using them, and they were used even in the 70s, where you'd send like text messages and stuff, the old text emails and things, which we still kind of use text emails today. But the graphics didn't come until the Mosaic browser came along in the early 90s. And that was transformational. Then shortly thereafter that was the Netscape browser, which made Mark Andreessen rich. And then the IPO for $3 billion and kicked off the internet.com boom. And I lived in Silicon Valley as this a lot of this was happening. Okay, so we're kind of at that stage now, where basically the self-driving at the beta stage is kind of like the Mosaic internet browser, and then when it goes fully commercial, that'll be like the Netscape Navigator browser, where it starts taking off, and then Tesla and Elon Musk will be able to use it for their own purposes. If they can actually use it in their factories, use it for warehouses, use it for delivery, they can replace Uber Eats for delivery. If I have a self-driving car and a robot can get in and out and deliver pizzas, then Uber Eats, a $10 billion business gets replaced and made bigger because you can then do delivery. So Elon, just like he's the early adopter for SpaceX to launch Starlink satellites, where basically he has made launch 5 times, 10 times cheaper, but other companies weren't ready to do something with that new capability, the new cost. He said, okay, well, I'll launch 3,000 of my own Starlink satellites and get business out of that. I'll finish launching another 10,000, 30,000, 40,000 of these things, and then I will take over communications, right? So similarly, he can start using the robot, humanoid robot, in his own factory. He can eat his own dog food and if he can make his factories twice as productive, 50% as productive, 50% more productive, then he goes from making, instead of ramping, going from 1.5 million cars this year to 3 million cars next year to 6 million cars in 2024, he could then speed that up and go from 1.5 million cars this year to 2.5 million cars next year to 7 million cars, 8 million cars, and those extra 2 million cars is worth $100 billion to him. Okay, so that's why he has the economic driving thing to make this work. He can take over $100 billion businesses, make $1 trillion businesses, make his own company worth instead of $1 trillion, $5 trillion, $10 trillion, $100 trillion. So he doesn't have to sell other people. He can just use it himself. But the fact that he would be using himself and beating everyone else up with it, all the other companies, then other companies will adopt. And other people who buy his vehicles will adopt it. So that's why things will roll out very quickly, because he's making it. He has the money to do it. There's no question about it. He already has the underlying AI software identifying objects, using the vision system, being able to navigate in the real world. And then he has the ability to gather all the data. He has an auto labeler for taking 2 gigabytes of data from every car and then labeling all the things in it. And they can use that same data stream to label people walking from their car up their driveway to their house, so that he can train, here's how your robot, you should walk from the car to the front door and deliver pizza. So it seems mundane, but actually, it's not, okay, I can solve some harder than human intelligence thing. I can just take the important economic things that we do and make it 10 times cheaper. That ends up being huge. So just like internet, like being able to click on a link and do a search is something that would then be super powerful. Some of the other AI that will help Elon and Tesla and make this even bigger is that Google has something called Google Lens, which is take an image and then doing a search based on that image. Find something that matches this bottle, find something that matches these headphones, and then find other ones like that. And they've already done over 8 billion searches last quarter of these visual searches. So Tesla can leverage that and say, okay, human and robot, look at these objects and then do a visual search. I don't know what this is. I'll do a visual search on Google. So certain things that are having AI can be leveraged by Tesla to make it easier to develop a AI that can work around in the real world, So, and then other things like we've already talked to our computers to give them instructions. That's things like Alexa, Siri, Google Home, and there's a company called AIGO, AIGO, with headed up by Peter Voss. It's a startup. He's already had a company that's made some tens of millions of dollars. This new company has also been funded and handles the customer service calls for FTD florists. So, but the difference between that and the other chatbots is that it can parse a sentence. So it has a fast parser. It can parse a sentence and say, okay, you're talking about your dog, you talk about your sister, and then add all the relationships and pull that data out and add it to a knowledge graph of a million data points. So they can preload it with a million facts. They can know, okay, here's the business of flowers, here's the names of flowers. And so you don't have to, you can then talk on that topic and then add new information specifically about the customer. So these kind of things mean that you'll be able to talk to the robot that walks and picks things up and give it simpler instructions to do. You can convert it, just like you can just pop into a GPS point and the car will navigate to it. It'll be just easy to use. So that's the difference, is the AI will be easy to use and generally applicable. It'll be able to figure things out. So huge initial low-hanging fruit markets that where if I can figure out driving, I replace truck drivers and taxi drivers, which doesn't need a robot at all. But you can pop in, if you can have a humanoid robot pop in and run our machines, a machine that can run our machine, a machine that can use our hand tools, then it can take over large categories of work and drive down that cost. And the demand for work for laborers is huge, especially if you can drive the cost down. Just like when we went from taking developed world workers in the 1960s and 70s and then outsourcing it to China, where the work was 5-10 times cheaper, there was this big global economic boom, where suddenly there's 10 times more labor and the cost was 10 times less. China got rich and the United States and the developed world got rich. Similarly, we would do this to take it from the workers here, take it from the Chinese workers, and say, okay, even cheaper than them. Instead of $10 an hour, get down to $1 an hour. A Tesla car costs $60,000. The Tesla humanoid bot weighs 30 times less. Tesla may not sell it for that price of $2,000, 30 times less, but their cost would be that $2,000 or maybe even $1,000. So then if you have $1,000 bot that can work for 8,000 hours a year because it doesn't have to sleep, then the cost of labor drops down to 25 cents per hour. And you can then mass produce these by the tens of billions, even 1 trillion of them. If you can make 100 million cars, these things are 30 times smaller, you can make 3 billion bots. Our entire global workforce is 3.3 billion. So then you can add every year the entire human workforce. And then you can then up level and increase production, go even faster. Just like our world economy increased 100 times from the 1800s. The oil that we fought over in World War II was 15 times less than the oil we have today. Everything that Hitler was trying to get from the Caucasus is the amount of oil that we use in like a day or two, right? He's trying to get oil for a year. So even though it seems like when that changed, we did scale up. And so as we get richer from self-driving cars and humanoid bots, we will scale up. So we won't stop at 3 billion matching the car industry. We're going to go bigger, right? It'll be 10 times, 100 times bigger. And then we're making 300 billion Tesla bots every year. We're making more cars, electric cars. We're making, instead of 1,000 SpaceX Starships, we're making 100,000. And then landing on Mars with 100 million tons, we can move our entire factories, gigafactories, over to Mars and then start replicating them. The factory that makes the factory. So the machines, the humanoid bots that run the other machines, that make the other machines, that can work in the factories, they can make another factory, they can mine. So those are the key things. Working in factories, making the supply chain work, doing mining, and building spaceships. Those basic tasks, those subsets of what we do, is the core. They'll end up doing more, because anything they can find that's more valuable than 25 cents an hour would be net productivity. So everything becomes more productive and everyone's generating more money. And this will make us all insanely rich, just like everyone today is insanely rich compared to someone from 200 years ago who only had one shirt, who only could eat cabbage and beans and could barely afford meat. So that's the difference between poor versus a technology rich world that is rich in technology and rich in the world. So that is the details of what will happen. I'll go over that in more detail as to the transformation of the real technological singularity. Thanks for listening.